Hi there, it's Austin with Aces of Average again. Today you can see I have a GoPro hooked up to my chest. I'm going to be going over how to tie and some of the uses of common rock climbing and mountaineering knots. These are all going to be separated into class 1 and what I'm going to call class 2 knots. And so the class 1 are knots that you need to know before you go outdoor mountaineering or climbing or caving. Even if you're the beginner and you're being guided, this is just to help you be safe and also be able to check your guide, make sure they know what they're doing, and everybody slips up sometimes. So it's really important to be able to check your guide's work. Class 2 is going to be over more advanced knots. If you want to be more self-reliant, maybe still using a guide, but be able to move into guiding yourself, right? Do kind of intro knots into that. Okay, so I think there's 11 knots in total. In the first class, I believe there's 6, and maybe 5 in the second class. So let's get into it.
Okay, so first let's go over some of the basic terminology. The ones that matter, there's actually a lot of rope terminology that honestly is not important, but things that are important, you'll hear in climbing, is a bite. So a bite is when you take 2 pieces of the same rope and bring it together. It makes what's called a bite here, this little loop. Okay, so we'll use that a lot. You can tie knots on a bite, right? And then you can also tie it through using the end of the rope. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that. The first knot on the list is called the overhand. You'll use this knot before, whether or not you knew the name, I don't know. So probably the easiest way to tie this is just going to, if you have the end of the rope, I'm going to make a bite. All right, so we have a bite. We're going to twist it, and then take that tail and stick it through the back. Okay, it kind of looks a little bit like a pretzel, but you can tighten that up. It's not really too good for anything by itself, but it can be used for a lot of things when tying it on a bite, right? So let's do it on a bite. So we're going to take a larger bite this time. We're going to put a lot, so we have a really big bite here. We're going to do the same thing. You can, of course, envision the same way I said, make a bite, twist it, and send it back through the back, or you can just simply make a loop and stick the end through that loop. Okay, so here's another thing that is really important about knots. You have to make sure they're dressed. Okay, and what dressed means is there's not crossing rope strands, and that makes them a lot stronger, right? And when I say crossing, I mean twisted over each other. You can see how nice and neat this looks versus what it had before, where you had something, I don't remember exactly how it was, but maybe something like this. See how it's crossed and it looks really ugly. Okay, so that's what's called dressing a knot. And then you stress a knot, right? Dressing, you dress it and stress it. So now that I have it, I'm going to pull each strand and it will tighten down, and that keeps it from slipping out. Okay, so that's a pretty strong knot. And it's useful in different ways, but you'll use it more when you're getting more into advanced climbing than the beginners. But that's a very entry-level knot. So the advantages of a overhand, you really don't need to worry about right now. It can be used to join anchors, to make a master point in an anchor system. But also the disadvantages is it can what's called invert. So I don't know if you just saw that. But if you had something pulling this way, you can actually invert. It's still pretty tough to do, but you can invert and you eventually roll itself out of the knot. Of course, it takes quite a bit of force to do that. But that's the disadvantages, I guess, of the overhand. Let's move on to a more useful knot and what you need to know going to a gym, if you're going to a gym to climb for the first time. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about the figure 8 knot. Now, the figure 8 or figure of 8 is probably the most important knot you should know if you're being guided, or if you're just going to a rock climbing gym. It's the most common knot you'll use. Okay, and you use it to tie yourself into the rope anytime you climb, and you can also tie it on a bite. Okay, so we'll go over those both from the end and then also on a bite. Now, the length you need if you're tying it from the end, what I like to do is you hold it in your hand and you stretch out your arm, so from your half wingspan to your shoulder, essentially. Is what we're doing here. Okay, so and there's clever ways to tie it. This is the way I learned it, and I think it's the most clear. So we'll go ahead and do that. So again, just like the overhand, we'll make a bite, right? I'm gonna go and take out that length of rope that I need. So here's our longer rope here. I'm gonna make a bite, Boom. We're gonna take this bite, and remember the overhand, we just turned it half, or one half flip, I guess you would say. And what we're gonna do with the figure eight is we're actually gonna do it twice, or one full rotation. So this rope is on the bottom right now. If this is the top and this is the bottom, we'll go around, we'll go all the way back around. So now it's back on the bottom. Hopefully that makes sense. It made sense to me when I was learning it. And we'll take this tag in here and stick it right through there. It's very recognizable, which is another advantage of it, is that you can make sure you're tying it right because it makes a figure eight. Okay, but you're not done yet. This is not useful. So now what we do is we tie into our harness. Okay, I just went ahead and stopped the other camera. So let's go ahead and tie it into our harness. Remember what I said in the first video, if it's soft, like a rope, we're gonna be tying into our tie-in points, not our belay loop, right? So we're gonna take this end here that we have, we're gonna go straight through there, the first tie-in point, go straight through the second tie-in point, and we're gonna pull all the way to where this knot is about a fist length away from our harness, okay? And it's called a figure eight follow through sometimes because you take this end, and we're gonna follow basically this strand right here, all the way back through. So hopefully this will make sense. It's going under this one. Okay, so we're gonna go under there. It's going, I'm gonna pull all that slack through. So this rope is following this rope. Following through, I'm gonna go around. And we're gonna go around. And hopefully I can make it clear here. Taking this nose and following this strand all the way back around. And it goes through here, right? Okay, and I purposely kind of tied this wonky so that way we can work on dressing, right? So this you'll see here, when I were to tighten this up, this is not dressed, maybe I stress it, but it's not dressed very well. So we're gonna take some time here. And once you do this for a while, you can actually learn to tie it where it's already dressed. Important with the figure eight is that you tighten, you pull each strand. You saw how much slack just came out of that one. Okay, and now you're ready to climb, okay? This is safe to fall on. It will self-tighten. And here's the reason that is used. You can check it very easily because it has 5 sets of parallel lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If it does not have those, it's not a figure eight, okay? Now a lot of gyms will ask you to do a knot on the end. We'll get to that next. But so let's go over the advantages and disadvantages. Advantages, a very recognizable knot. It's easy to tie, okay? It's self-tightening, okay? The disadvantage to that is it's self-tightening. So if you fall a whole bunch on it, it will get hard to untie, which if you ever want to untie a really tightened figure eight, there's some tricks. You can break it over on itself. It makes it easier. You can loosen it up. But people will say they use a bowline or improved bowline because it doesn't tighten as much. To be honest, the self-tightening is an advantage rather than disadvantage, and this is so popularly used that you should just use this knot, okay, when you're climbing. Let's go ahead and tie it on a bite. We take a little bit less time here, but kind of the same principle. For if you get a whole bunch of slack here, make a bite, spin it all the way around, and you feed it back through. So I think this is the simplest way to understand tying a figure eight, but there are much better ways that you can see how messy this knot is now. Now, you'll probably never tie it on a bite when you're rock climbing because, well, now I have to use a carabiner to join this to my harness, so it's not very useful. It is useful if you're mountaineering. You can tie this in the middle of a rope. However, we'll go over another knot that's better for that. All right, so to summarize, advantages, very recognizable, easy to check. It self-tightens. Disadvantages, it self-tightens, so it can be hard to untie sometimes. It also can invert just like the overhand, but it's much harder to invert. Okay, as you can see here, I tied another figure eight into my harness, and the next knot I'm going to talk about is a fisherman's knot. Okay, or some people call it a stopper knot. So this knot is perfectly safe to climb on. However, many gyms require you to do a what's called a stopper knot or a fisherman's knot with the slack you have. Some people call it a safety knot. Really don't like that because it actually adds no additional safety, to be honest. This knot is perfectly safe enough by itself, but really it gets rid of the slack, and it can have other uses. For example, joining a loop of cord. So the way you tie this knot, I'm going to angle the camera up here this time. This is our tag end, and this can be tied around itself or around another strand. So pretend this strand is a whole different piece of rope if you want to. Hopefully there'll be other videos that make this more clear. So you wrap it around once, makes a loop around everything, you wrap it around twice. The second loop must be behind the first one, so it can't be like this, right? So now see how it's in front? This is the first loop I made. This is the second loop. It's ahead of it. It needs to be behind it, so let's restart this. I'm gonna go once around, it's a loop, around the second time, and again that second loop is behind the first. That means these loops will have an X in them. Hopefully you can see the X here. And then finally you stick it right through the back of both loops. Okay. Something you'll notice about this knot: one, it's pretty recognizable. It has an X on one side, 2 loops on the other. It can slide, okay? That's something interesting about this knot. So it can slide up and down. So people call it stopper because, let's say if this tightens down or something, it will slide down. It will slide down and stop. Again, that won't happen with this knot though, because it's self-tightening. That's something you should know just for a gym. You won't have a whole lot of other purposes for that knot unless you're making a cruciate cord or a loop out of accessory cord. Okay, the next knot we're going to use is a girth hitch. Okay, you've probably tied this before, even without realizing it. If you have a loop, put your fingers in there and do this. That's a girth hitch. Okay, it tightens down, and it's actually pretty strong. So let me get a carabiner. It might be easier if I get a carabiner to show this knot. So the easiest way to learn this, and this is because it can be compared to other knots in this way. There's 3 knots that you can tie like this very easily. But first we'll go with the girth hitch. So here's your end of your rope. You can also tie it in the middle of the rope. More often than not, you will tie it in the middle of the rope. It's not very safe on the end. Okay, that's a disadvantage there. So let's start with the loop. I'll tie a loop. The way you do the loop matters, okay? Meaning if I were to tie it like this, or make the loop like this, or make the loop like this, that matters, okay? So the way I've learned is I'm right-handed, take your right hand, put it over on top of your left hand, right? And then you have your first loop. On the other loop, you'll actually do the opposite. So I'm gonna take it. You can imagine doing the exact same motion, but opposite bottom, okay? Now you have this weird looking pretzel-y kind of thing, and then you'll flop them together. And you'll clip in, let's see if I can angle my camera down. And you will clip into this. And you'll notice this is called a girth hitch. And what a hitch is that means you're tying it to another object, not to a rope, essentially. That is a girth hitch. It's very pretty looking, and you'll use it a lot with slings. Okay, so oftentimes you'll use a sling and girth hitch it to your harness. That's probably the most common use. So let me go and show you that really quickly. So I have a sling. Take it, again, it's soft, so it goes through our soft points, or our tie-in points, also called. Carabiner out of the way. So pull it all the way through. And you're going to pass it inside itself and pull it. And anytime you're tying a knot, we want to make sure our sew-in pieces are out of the knot. It reduces the strength of the knot. So there you are. And you can pull on this and you are really strong there into your sling. Very easy to untie. So advantages, it's very simple, very easy to recognize. There it is again. Very easy to tie, and it's really strong. Disadvantages, it can slide, so you don't want to load one side of the knot. You want to load both of them. You want to load both sides of the knots, and then also you don't want to tie it near the end of a rope. Okay. Also, it does have a really sharp bend in it sometimes. Anytime you put a sharp bend in something, it reduces the strength, sometimes up to 50%. So if this, let's say this sling was rated up to 100 pounds, if I tied a really sharp bend in it like this and pulled on it really hard, it'd break at 50 pounds, right? So that's really important. So you don't really need to know that at a beginner level, but something to keep in mind. Okay, so next on the list is the clove hitch. Now, the clove hitch is really useful when you're doing multi-pitch climbing. Outside of multi-pitch climbing, probably won't use it much. And there's another nomenclature word vocabulary important to learn: multi-pitch climbing. I won't explain that. I'll let you find that on your own. So, very similar to the girth hitch, we're going to create a loop. This is again I'm tied in on one end, so this is in the middle of the rope. And one rope, one loop. Again, direction matters. Just be consistent. I always do right hand over my left. So be consistent. remember with the girth hitch, we went the opposite way, left hand, left over right, right? And then fold them together as our girth hitch. On this one, so cliff hitch starts the same way, left over right, left over right again. Let's see if I can twist this a little bit, make it a little cleaner. Use too much twist on my hand. There we go. So we're going to go ahead and start left over right again. Okay, we're actually going to take the second hoop we made and slide it behind the first and clip into that. Okay, so again, slide it behind, and I happen to have a quick draw hanging up here. Okay, and we're going to tighten this down here. So the advantages and disadvantages of this knot. This knot is fully safe to take your weight, okay? Now, what most people use it for is tying yourself into an anchor. Now, the reason it's used is because it's very easy to adjust how much slack you have in the line, right? So I can like move myself closer to the anchor. Of course, I tied a lot of slack in there, but you can still do it. And pull inside. There we go. So now I'd be tied into the anchor nice and tight. Once you twist it nice and tight here. Of course, if I need to move out a little bit, I can loosen it. Now, what's important here is that you do not use this to tie into your harness or use this to climb on. And the reason that is because if you're weighting it and unweighting it and weighting it, unweighting it, weighting it, unweighting it, you can get kind of messy and loose, right? And you don't want to be falling on something like this when it could potentially unclip or something like that, right? So, very important. All right, I think there's just one more knot. Something I want to go ahead and mention, since we have a quick draw, is back clipping. Look at this up as well. Basically, if you're climbing with quick draws or any sort of protection, you want to tie or clip into the quick draw such that the rope leading to you is coming towards you. Okay, so if the wall is right here, it's coming towards you out of the quick draw. And the reason you do that is if you fall like this, you'll fall away from the wall. You'll fall and you'll be caught. If you do it the opposite way, so now there's a weird twist in it. Right? If I were to follow this in, it has to go around the quick draw and then straight down. So now if I were to fall, I can potentially, if I were to fall, well, it's hard to do sometimes, but if it gets in the right spot, and clip itself. Okay. So look up back clipping. That's what's called back clipping. Next will be the Alpine Butterfly. A lot of climbers don't even know this one. It's very handy for clipping into the middle of a rope if you're doing a rope team for crevasse, for crevasse crossing and things like that. Very easy to tie. You just do 3 loops around your hand, take that middle one, you go and actually get a little more slack out here. So do 3 loops. Take the middle one, again, show it one more time. 1, 2, 3. Take the middle one and move it to the middle. And then all the way back through everything. Okay. That's all there is to it. It's like, oh, that's really ugly knot. Well, you pull that loop out, and you pull sideways. It looks kind of weird and funky. You gotta dress it and stress it, as we know. It has this really funky little shape here, but the advantage of this is that it's made to be pulled laterally to the rope. So let's say the rope's hanging like this, is designed to be pulled downward and upward. So that helps it not invert. This will not invert even if it's pulled like this, unlike the figure 8. You could use the figure 8 for the same use, but technically this is probably a little bit stronger. Don't worry about this unless you are mountaineering. Okay, so that's it for the part 1 video. I don't know when I'll get to the part 2 video. It depends if people want me to make that or not. By people, I mean, honestly, if just one person wants me to, I will. Don't really care. I'm mainly making these videos so that when I take people out climbing or mountaineering, I can give them a list of videos to watch, so that way they can prepare themselves, right? To make our team a little bit more efficient, right? All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in part 2.